clients all the time, and I was like, and I'm
and gentlemen, welcome to the 4th Digital Transformation and Government Conference. My name is Bob Weissman. I'm your host. And now we have the pleasure of welcoming the next speaker. Okay. Yvan Gauthier is the head of Artificial Intelligence Accelerator program at the National Research Council of Canada. He's going to be talking about the benefits of AI adoption in government. And Yvan is a senior research council officer with the National Research Council of Canada's Digital Technologies Division, where he leads the AI Accelerator for the Government of Canada. The AI Accelerator delivers impactful and responsible artificial intelligence solutions to other federal departments and agencies and supports them in their digital transformation. Before joining the NRC, Yvan worked for 20 years as a defense scientist, with Defense R&D Canada, where he became the first ever director of data science and established a new enterprise data science team supporting DND's chief data officer. He also chaired a NATO specialist team on advanced analytics and artificial intelligence and has led several operational research projects while being embedded with various branches of DND, National Defense, and the Canadian Armed Forces. He has a master's in science from Carleton University, as well as graduate certificates in management from the London School of Economics, data science from Harvard University, and public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School. Without further ado, I now turn the lecture over to Yvan.
Merci, Bob. And thanks for inviting me again this year. Really happy to be here. So as Bob mentioned, I'm part of the National Research Council. I'm actually part of our Digital Technologies Division. As Phil mentioned, the Digital Technologies Division includes a lot of specialists, over 100 specialists in different parts of digital, so machine learning, machine vision, machine translation, data analytics, privacy, security, you name it. And as most of the divisions at the NRC, we do three things. As Phil mentioned, we advance scientific knowledge. Research is a big component of what we do. We also, as Phil mentioned, support business of innovation and small businesses. But the third pillar of what NRC does is to help the rest of the government, by delivering solutions, helping the government to achieve policy objectives. And that's really where the AI Accelerator fits. So as Bob mentioned, we deliver impactful, innovative, responsible AI solutions. We do that by doing small projects with other government departments, typically projects that will take 3 to 6 months. But at the end of these 3 to 6 months, we're going to have a product or a solution that's going to have an impact. So we are really there not to work on theoretical problems, but on concrete problems that other departments may have. We really focus on innovative work. So the intent here is not to reinvent off-the-shelf solutions that departments could exist. We really want to innovate. And responsible AI solutions, because of course that's what Canadians are expecting from federal departments and agencies. So when I was here last year, virtually, I gave examples of accelerator projects. I will today as well give you some examples of accelerator projects. But last year, I really focused on the growth of the ecosystem, the AI ecosystems within the Government of Canada. And I also spent a lot of time discussing lessons learned over the years and strategies for AI adoption, with a view of helping other departments to avoid some mistakes, and it helped them to build robust AI strategies around their digital transformation. And I think these lessons that I discussed last year are still accurate and useful. But regardless of what your AI strategies or views may have been last year, a lot of things have happened over the last 6 to 8 months, and you have to take them into account, including ChatGPT. ChatGPT has taken a lot of people by surprise in the community, even the leadership of OpenAI. They were not expecting that kind of impact. ChatGPT got to 2 million, no, excuse me, it's 1 million users in 2 days, 100 million users in 2 months. That had never been seen before. And I mean, ChatGPT is just one of many models. Since ChatGPT was released last November, based on GPT 3.5, you already see other models coming out. You have Bard from Google, you have Claude from Anthropic, you have Llama from Facebook/Meta. And these things are already changing the game quite a lot. And I'm not even talking about other types of generative AI beyond large language models. But yeah, these new models, they're changing the game. And there's also something interesting here happening. So Llama, released by Facebook in February, end of February, was doing already pretty well if you compare it to ChatGPT. Well, 2 weeks after it was released, Stanford University released Alpaca, which improved the performance quite a lot. And just 1 week after that, another academic project released Vicuna, which, according to some metrics, got to pretty close to ChatGPT. And this is an old slide from end of November, but end of March. But since then, other models have came out that are doing even better than that. And the things to notice here is that these models, in most cases, they're open. They're much smaller. So at 13 billion parameters, they're almost an order of magnitude smaller than some commercial models. It means you can run them on a laptop. You can train them for a few $100s. You can probably use them on the phone. Someone managed to run them on the Raspberry Pi. So that opens all kinds of opportunities, including opportunities for the government. And I will discuss that a bit later. The other thing to notice here, in case it's not obvious, is the pace of progress. Things are improving very, very fast. And that is a bit, it's becoming a concern for some people. I've been talking to a lot of people in the government over the last few years. And I would say until last fall, most of the discussion in groups like this, the comments I was getting were quite positive. People were excited about AI and where it's going to go and all the opportunities. And since ChatGPT came out, a lot of people are now a lot more concerned. The type of questions and comments I get are very different. Some of these comments are fueled by all the news stories that we hear, and I'm going to discuss that a bit later. But anyway, the discourse is changing a lot. So what I want to do today with the rest of my presentation is try to give you a balanced view of things when it comes to the use of AI in the government. Because yeah, it's easy to lose perspective if you just read the news. And so I'm going to give you my perspective, and I want to stress that this is my own personal perspective. It's not an official position of the NRC or the government. But in a simple way, I would see things like this. In government, you have 3 types of AI. You have the good AI, which will give you all kinds of benefits. And not just productivity benefits. If you look at the scientific literature, there's a lot more to just efficiency and performance. I will discuss that in a minute, but there's a lot more other benefits that AI can bring. But there's also the bad AI, which is often well-intentioned, but that has a lot of risk, or if it's used in a negligent way, will harm people or harm the business you're working on. And of course, there's the ugly AI. In that case, I define the ugly as the adversarial AI. So people using AI against government and ultimately against the citizen and against the society. So I was talking about the good AI. Let's talk about efficiency and performance. That's probably the most obvious type of benefit in adopting AI in a department. And I'm gonna focus on many times on generative AI, but you have all these productivity tools that are coming out, Copilot from Microsoft, Duet from Google and whatnot. I mean, these things are already having a huge impact, especially in the programming world. They will have a huge impact on business process automation as well. But the risk there, and we already discussed some of these things this morning. First, a lot of generative AI any kind of AI will have some bias in the results. So you have to be very cognizant of that. In the case of generative AI, there's always a risk of getting poor results, if not complete hallucinations. So you have to be very careful about that. And there's also all the privacy and security and the IP issue that have to be careful about. And this was mentioned during the previous presentation as a question, but yeah, there's a lot of risk in using some of these tools that are online and put some sensitive information in the prompt and leak it. And that's why some companies like Samsung, like Apple, are starting to clamp down on the use of some of these tools. So the takeaway here is that these tools are useful. For some applications, they can be used, but for some other applications, they're not necessarily the best option, and we may have to find alternative options within the government, and I will discuss that. Another important benefit is the economic benefits of AI. I'm going to come back to productivity just for a minute here. The value from the productivity boosts from these tools in government is really, really big. So if you take the government of Canada, for example, we have over 300,000 employees. The average salary from what I got is about $80,000. So if these tools can save just 1 week of work on average to employees, and for some employees like programmers, it will probably be a lot more, and for some employees it will be less, but assume 1 week of work in time saved that you can invest elsewhere for doing better things. You're already in the billions easily. And if you calculate the bigger impact on GDP, it's even bigger. So the value of these tools is significant. There's also an impact on competitiveness. So we were mentioning in the previous session, I think when one of the person asking a question was talking about, how the government helps small businesses. We do have a program at the NRC called the Industrial Research Assistant Program, helps small Canadian businesses to become more innovative and more competitive. Well, we are already internally at NRC helping IRAP to use these tools and in different ways. And the companies who receive financial assistance from IRAP, that program, very often they will invest into AI as well and do all kinds of very cool things that I can talk to you about offline. But this is an example of all the economic benefits you can get from AI. The flip side is, of course, AI will not only displace tasks, it will probably displace jobs. Well, almost certainly displace jobs. This will have social impacts that we need to start thinking about. It's hard to calculate what this social impact will cost exactly. What's easier to calculate, though, is how much using these tools will cost us. And I think we need to start thinking about that, because if every time we have to do work in government and we call an API from a commercial provider at 5 cents or 10 cents, and we have to process millions and millions of records, that starts to add up pretty quickly. And not only that, we start to be reliant on a handful of model providers outside of the country. And again, that involves some IP issues and all and whatnot. So there's a lot of risk there that we need to think about. Risk identification and monitoring. If there's one area where AI has been very, very strong for a long time, it's in anomaly detection, identifying abnormal behaviors. And we do have, at the NRC, for example, teams who for many years now have helped other government departments do all kinds of outbreak detection systems and outbreak detection platforms to detect new viruses, new food safety issues, all kinds of things like that. And in this case, there's no direct economic benefit immediately in building these tools, but there's a huge, it's like an insurance policy. There's a huge value in having these tools. If you take into account the fact that, for example, COVID was costing Canada $1.5 billion a day during the first year of the pandemic, any kind of tool that can help you, detect that early, mitigate that, or whatever, has huge value. Technology foresight is one thing that I mentioned last year. It's an accelerator project we're doing with D&D. We basically use language model to process huge corpus of scientific publications and try to identify weak signals of emerging technology, so we know if a technology is emerging and if it's going to impact potentially national security or economic security. That's something that used to be very difficult to do, but with language models will become easier. The risk there is when you start to do risk identification on people. And for example, if you want to do fraud detection, because AI models are always to some degree biased, and there's a lot of stories from all over the world about fraud detection systems that went very wrong, that started to be biased against different populations. These models are often black boxes. You cannot explain what's coming out of them. So fortunately, in Canada, we have excellent work that was done to build rules against using that sort of tools. And our next speaker, I'm sure, will discuss the automated directive on the directive on automated decision making that prevent these things from being put online. Data and information management. I think this is a underestimated benefit of AI. AI has a huge potential to improve the way we manage and process our data. And I'm going to give you an example that we did actually with another department. The department wanted to use open data to improve their compliance monitoring activities. The issue with open data is often very poorly formatted. In our case, we had millions and millions of addresses that were in free-form text. How do you parse that kind of addresses? How do you figure what's the city, what's the country, what's the street number, and so on? Well, language models are very good at doing that, and now you can do that very quickly. You can also use AI to fill the gaps in your data if impute missing information. But of course, you have to be very careful because these models are not necessarily perfect. They may make errors, so you have to measure the errors. You have to understand the performance of your model. And again, you don't want to just send your data elsewhere. That data is where the value is. So you just don't want to share your entire database with anybody. So you have to be very careful about privacy issues and security issues. Government services and citizen engagement. Now that's a big one. And I could give you many examples of where AI will have an impact there. One example close to home at NRC. At NRC, every time we have a new employee, a new student, a new research collaborators, the person has to go through a fairly, how should I say, complex onboarding process. So the onboarding will generate a lot of service tickets for getting the person network access and laptops and accommodation and security and a pass and everything. And our client service center was trying to improve this whole onboarding process. So what we did for them is we built a tool that initially was quite simple. It was basically a set of dashboards with different performance metrics around different parts of the process. But slowly we added diagnostic analytics, and recently we added machine learning and predictive analytics, so that as soon as a ticket is in, you can already tell with a certain amount of precision what's the probability that the ticket will not be fulfilled on time. So they can already track from the beginning, what are the risk of not getting the person his or her laptop or office or whatnot. So that's quite useful, and that's for an internal service. But you could apply the same thing for an external service, of course. NLP for public consultations, that's also something we're starting to work on. A lot of departments, they either want or have to consult the public when there's a new initiatives, new regulations. But in some cases, they get hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of comments from the public in natural language, and asking humans to process that in a systematic way is very hard. But language models are pretty good at doing that. So building systems that will categorize things, summarize things, identify keywords and whatnot, you can do that now much more easily. Service chatbots. This is not something we've done, but let's face it, chatbots historically have not been great. Like, I don't think a lot of people like to deal with chatbots, but they have the potential to get a lot better. There's a programmer in Ottawa who released Text GPT this year in the middle of the tax season, and I think it took him 2 or 3 weeks to build, and it was extremely useful. I used it for my own taxes. It gave me good advice, and it saved me money. And I think you will see these the chatbot technology improve quite a lot and become a lot more useful. There's also a lot of people who now, instead of going on government websites, they go straight to ChatGPT when they have a question about government services. Why are they doing that? Because the user experience they feel is probably better that asking a question to ChatGPT than going on, I don't know, Canada.ca website and searching and getting, 20 records and you getting into a research project and trying to find out the information that they need. So that's happening, and in some cases, I guess the chatbots are useful, but in other cases, they're not. And there's evidence of citizens getting wrong advice in Canada and elsewhere. I talked to some of my colleagues internationally, and the chatbots will often give you the wrong advice. It may tell you to call a service center somewhere or send a form by mail to this address, when there's a portal that already exists and could fulfill your needs much more quickly and much more effectively and at a much lower cost for the government. So we have to be very cognizant of these things. We also have to be cognizant of, again, privacy and security issue. You don't want citizens to discuss the details of their case and private information with a system that is not perfectly secure. Decision making, another big one. There's a lot of ways in which generative AI will assist there. One of them is augmented analytics. And I've always been, personally, as a data scientist, I've always been skeptical of these automated tools that allegedly do the analysis for you or the machine learning for you. But I must admit that they are getting better. And now there are tools, even in the open source, where you can basically, quote unquote, talk to your data and ask the system to build different visualizations, build different queries automatically. And yeah, they do what they do. And I think that's useful because in some cases, building graphs like this can take some time. The flip side is these things still make a lot of errors. So if you want rigorous analysis, if you want to take into account outliers, missing data, and whatnot, you still need a human in the loop. You cannot just trust these tools blindly. And again, you have to be very careful because if you're asking to do an analysis about a sensitive decision, if you want to use sensitive data, you cannot just share your data with anybody. You cannot just use these open source tools that we'll call an OpenAI API. And you have to be very careful about the old pipeline here. I want to mention the scientific benefits because, as Phil mentioned, we have many science-based departments in Canada. We have the NRC. Other countries have national labs. So AI will have a big impact there. Phil mentioned all the work that's going on in terms of laboratory, IoT and automation and whatnot. In the case of generative AI, there will be a lot of new discoveries coming from it. That's probably the biggest benefit there. In the world of biotechnology, it's already having a big impact in finding new proteins, new drugs. These models are very, very good. Again, it's not all perfect. First, you have to be careful about who's going to get access to these models, because if you can create drugs, maybe you can also create new toxins and nasty stuff. But there's also the fact that it's not in all scientific fields that things are moving that quickly. For example, in chemistry, apparently generative AI is not having that much impact. Why? Because apparently the data is not as in good shape as it would be in other fields where they had like big databases of proteins and whatnot. In chemistry, it's more complicated, and apparently AI is not having the same kind of impact. And that's a reminder that AI is only as good as the data you put in it. And within government, we have to be extremely careful and have strong strong data foundations if we want to be able to fully leverage AI. And also have to be careful about IP issues. Already discussed that, but this is a big deal if you want to use some of these tools to do scientific discovery. Well, who's going to have the IP if you start to use proprietary tools? Sustainability. I mean, AI is already having a big impact in the natural resource sector. There's all kinds of energy sector transformation initiative that can be, fueled by AI. You can think about smart grids, which has the potential to save billions and billions of dollars. The flip side in this case, and it really pertains to generative AI, is that these large language models are getting bigger and bigger and bigger exponentially. So they're getting extremely costly from an environment perspective to train. But personally, I'm more concerned about the cost of using them, because the traffic on these tools and the inference cost it's significant, and the electricity consumption and the carbon footprint from all these tools is also significant. And we need to think about, are we always using these tools in the right way? Do we need these extremely large language models for everything that we do, or small models with a smaller footprint would do the trick in some cases. We need to think about these things. So I covered a lot of benefits and risk. I now need to turn to the ugly AI. Again, it's the adversarial use of AI against government, which could take different forms, starting with disinformation at scale. We can think of election interference, for example, misleading public health messages. I'm going to show you an example here from Microsoft Research. They used a pre-alignment version of GPT-4. So that's not the version of GPT-4 that is out. That's the version that was not aligned or trained properly and released. In this case, they asked GPT-4 to create a misinformation plan for convincing parents not to vaccinate their kids. And they gave the specifics of the people to be targeted. And what GPT-4 produced is a bit scary because it's quite good. And you could think about, reusing that in an automated fashion to produce, misinformation plans that are targeted at you in a very effective way. And even, I'm sorry to say, but even if GPT-4 and OpenAI have put some safeguards around that, it doesn't mean that other companies will do that. It doesn't mean that open source models will do that. And this kind of disinformation will happen. What are we going to do about it? There's probably different things we can do. But one thing we can do is actually use the good AI, because as I mentioned, AI is very good at detecting anomalies and abnormal behavior. And there's already some solutions that are being built for detecting misinformation automatically. There's also work on countermeasures to figure out if a model has been tweaked so that it has a certain adversarial spin or a certain partisan spin. So there's all kinds of things that can be done there and where AI can be useful. Cyber attacks, a bit of a similar story. You could do very advanced phishing with some of these models because you can basically target your audience and have very sophisticated messages that are well written in multiple languages. There's also people who have used ChatGPT to build polymorphic malware, so malware that can change its form and evade all kinds of even the most sophisticated security systems. So there's a lot of things we need to think about here, and these are not theoretical, they will happen. But again, AI is part of the solution here, extremely powerful to scan for vulnerabilities automatically, scan the security logs. You can also use AI as a hacker to basically test your systems before, and some companies are already starting to leverage generative AI as part of their cybersecurity suites. So finally, I'm gonna stop my list here with the rogue AIs. I would be remiss if I didn't cover that because it's making the news a lot. But many AI researchers, top AI researchers, are now warning the world. There's a risk that AI could improve to the point it reaches superintelligence. It could reach the point where it can improve itself unchecked. It could reach the point where it would be misaligned with their own creators, deceive their own creators, and ultimately pose an existential risk to humanity. Is this a near-term threat? Absolutely not. Does it mean that we have to not think about it? No. I mean, even if the probability of this happening is very, very low, the consequences are so high that at some point the risk is there, and we need to think about it. And part of the solutions here are AI regulations and standards. There's a lot of alignment techniques that are actually based on AI. So you could use AI models to keep other AI models in check. That's called constitutional AI. And there's a lot of safety research that is happening around that and that we need to pursue. So where should we go from here? I mean, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, maybe we should ban these tools from being used in the government. Maybe we should just pause the development of their application, pause the development of their development by industry, and basically stop and not do anything, and something good will happen from stopping. I'm not sure that I share that opinion. In my view, and again, this is my personal view, we need to actually accelerate the adoption of AI in government, but trustworthy AI. The benefits are just too big to ignore. I listed all of them. There's a lot of things you can do. I don't think you can do digital transformation without AI. You can do some digitization, you can transform the front end, but if you really want to transform the back end, you need machine learning, and you're gonna need AI, including generative AI. So we need to keep continuing doing that. But of course, we need to do that in a responsible way. And we also have to be very careful about our data foundation. So it's not just about AI, it's about our data foundations. All these models being trained on the internet, they're useful, but the value really comes from our own data within the government. That's where the competitive advantage is. That's where the value is. So without good data foundation, there's no good AI that will come out. At the same time, though, we want to prevent the bad by increasing our ability to test and evaluate AI solutions before they are implemented in the government. And that means two things. There's the technical side, where we need the expertise within the government to understand what's going on with these tools and test them and understand the training data behind them and secure them. But there's also the governance aspect. So again, our next speaker will talk about that, but we need the mechanisms and the policies in place to ensure that all that is well governed and that we use the AI in a responsible fashion. And there's the ugly piece. We need to prepare for that as well. So we need to protect our government services and our government's communications from adversarial AI. Again, there's a technical part to that because we're going to need the tool to detect some of these things and to warn us from any attacks. We're going to need privacy preserving techniques and approaches to make sure that if an attack is successful, we don't lose the citizens' data to the attackers. But there's also a governance aspect there in the sense that we're going to have to regulate on AI safety. And that's probably an international effort that we're going to have to be part of. And yeah, at NRC, we do some work around these three things, but we will need to do more, and we want to do more if we want to be successful in the future. So I'm going to leave it at that. And thank you for your time and take questions.
Now, what we're going to do is not ignore the people that are waiting. We've got some questions in the Q&A. Okay. If you want, I can pose them to you. And what I'd like to do is I might read back questions that you give it because they can't hear virtually. Okay, so the reading back. Okay, we have one question on the bad, ugly side. Can you talk a bit about how best to reduce the risk of using generative AI in terms of targeting online hate and securing digital justice?
Oh, that's a big one. The only thing, I'm not sure I can address the entire question. What I will say, though, is that language models are getting better at detecting toxic comments and materials. It's been an area of research for a long time. That said, I would say, and I looked at that this week as part of another project, but even the most cutting edge model are still far from perfect when it comes to identify hate speech. And if they get to 80%, it's normally good, but they will still miss it. So it's not a perfect solution. I'm also starting to see, and that's also scary as well, but if you use cutting edge models to generate the hate speech, you may be able to fool some automated systems that will detect the hate speech. So again, it's a bit of an arm race there, but AI is part of the solution there, because it's the only means we have to process a lot of digital content and filter it.
Okay, the next question is, are there any initiatives, frameworks, or working groups, like a community of practice, in place to ensure the ethical use of AI in government operations?
I think so, but I'm gonna shamelessly leave that to the next speaker, who's the authority in the field, and because I know there was a lot of consultation and happening as part of the work that Benoit will present, so he knows better than I do what's happening there.
Over to you, Benoit. Yeah, okay, Ambulin, to ensure AI is used in a responsible and ethical manner and it's not misused against the people, what framework is available in the Canadian government to ensure that AI systems used are transparent and accountable, that it protects privacy of individual and builds public trust to mitigate the risk of bias?
Yeah,
you can
yeah. Again, there's an hour coming forth on that.
Okay, so you'll get that question from Benoit. Okay. Shori, what measures are being taken to mitigate potential bias and discrimination that can arise from AI algorithms in the government's decision-making processes?
Okay, there's two things here. Like yes, they're mitigating bias at the algorithmic level, which is possible to do, but you can never mitigate bias to the point of eliminating it. And so what I really like about our framework that we have in Canada is that and again, I don't want to steal Benoit's thunder, but we have the algorithmic impact assessment, which forces us for some applications to look at what's going to be the impact of this if there's bias, if things go wrong, because you cannot have full control on the algorithms, on the underlying data. So you need to see, okay, if things go wrong, what will be the impact, and then do the risk assessment from there, and upgrade your algorithm, or maybe decide not to deploy things. And in some cases, that's the responsible thing to do, that not deploy a model for the intended use. So I'm gonna take the next question.
Okay, great. Are there any restrictions on using sources like ChatGPT in the government?
Yes, although it's coming, and again, I'm not sure. Benoit, are we going to discuss that, or should I try something? Because we're not the authority for it. We were consulted on what's coming from the Treasury Board, but yes, there will be guidance on how to use ChatGPT and other generative AI tools for all the reasons I mentioned: IP issues, environmental issues, privacy issues, security issues. All these things need to be considered, but it's a case-by-case basis, and you have to do your own assessment.
Yeah, and I think Shori's question is going to be answered by Benoit. So that's something. Now, do you folks have any questions in here? Now, we can only take a few, and then what happens is we got to get ready for Benoit Dehead, the director from Treasury Board. Okay, for that. So please, Yvan, and we'll read back the question to make sure that they hear you in the virtual world.
Yes.
It's not a question as much as a statement. So rather than trying to control and regulate, legislate, or whatever the right words are, the products, my belief is you need to help the professionals in the industry. So ISAC is one. what is ethical behavior for professional use? We don't legislate everything lawyers do or doctors do. We need the same philosophy in IT. So teach ethics in school, adhere to ethics as a professional, and some of these issues won't happen.
I think you're partly right.
That's good.
I mean, no, but I mean, in the sense that we have to be careful because we often hear about, okay, let's do an AI regulation for this. Like, I mean, AI is a tool, so it can be used for all kinds of things. If I take a hammer and I kill someone in the street, well, we shouldn't do a law about hammers and how they can be dangerous. Like there's a criminal code and I just did harm to somebody. And the same kind of thinking can be applied. So there's a lot of laws that exist that applies. There's all kinds of the government has a value and ethics code, and there's all kinds of things like that exist. That being said, if you talk about on a day-to-day basis, people ask questions: Can I use this? Can I use this? Can I use this? And these are legitimate questions, and there's a risk in scientific applications and all kinds of government businesses to use these tools in the wrong way. And it's good that we have guidance and directives around that. If you talk about the commercial sector, well, I think standards are going to be useful, and I think there's going to be needs for audits if AI continues to develop the way it develops. I don't know exactly what these standards should look like. There's all kinds of work being done internationally, and some of these frameworks are pretty good. But I don't know, keeping things completely loose, unchecked, I'm not sure. I think there's a need for some safeguards here.
It's under one way or the other.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question, please.
So what I find really interesting about the whole discussion on AI, and it's the same discussion we have throughout digital transformation. So we've disconnected the technology from the human. So 10 years leading digital transformation projects, the biggest reason I've seen that causes failures is we assume the technology is going to solve the business problem, and we forget about the person, the human actually using the technology to then solve the business problem. And the same thing is being repeated here. When we read about AI, AI will do this. AI won't do this. AI will take over the world. AI will save the world. But we're maintaining that discourse of disconnecting the human from the technology. And until we can wrap our minds around the fact that we have agency and we are the ones doing ABC or not doing ABC, we're going to just continue repeating the same failures that we've seen in digital transformation. I mean, a 70% failure rate with digital transformation. Just because it's AI doesn't mean we're out of this business of failures. So do you see a world where we can start really connecting these two things, the human and the technology? And what would take us to break the trend?
So first, I agree. I've seen the same kind of stats have you seen in terms of big digital transformation projects? I'm not a fan of them personally, and I don't get involved in them. I think the solution that I've seen that is being taught in schools and around the world is to be more agile and start small and build things. And that's what we're trying to do with the accelerator. So we say, like, people want to get into 3 years projects, and no, like 3 months, we're going to get you from there to there, and we're going to do that in a very user-centric basis, and speak to the users, and at the end of these 3 to 6 months, we're going to have something that's not going to be perfect, but we're going to have shown progress. And most of the time, our collaborators or clients, they come back and we do a phase 2 and a phase 3, and to me that's the way of implementing these things in a business. I'm sure there are some big enterprise modernization projects where this kind of approach may not be ideal, but I don't know. But for my daily type of work, it's start small, do small steps, small sprints, and that's the best way to go about it. And it does help with the human element that you're talking about.
Yeah, because the agile philosophy
Yeah.
really rotates on learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Yvan. Actually, now being in person, you can ask Yvan, he's here, okay, afterwards. So please, I'd like to thank Yvan for taking the time to present. What I would like to do is. And before we go for break, just remember that AI was ruled out in the Quebec government in 1988. Okay, so we're dealing with, back to the future to a certain extent, but I think now it's a little bit more advanced. And Hillary Clinton was advised in 2015 that 2/3 of the jobs would eventually be replaced. Okay, due to automation, new jobs will be created, but 2/3, and that would create social unrest. So just take a look what's happening in society, not just in the US, but elsewhere. Okay, so thank you very much. Listen, take 10 minutes, go have a cup of coffee, stretch your legs, and I'll get Ben what's that up. It's on. Here we go.